of the year, we took you back to 2018 and gave you a Metropol TV 10 big moments in business in 2018 that we thought shaped your business in 2018, and we're going to help you make a proper focus of your business in 2019. And that gave us an idea.
Yes, it definitely gave us an idea to start a business weekly affair that is the top 10 business stories of the week that may just shape your week in business.
And so we take this opportunity to welcome you to our first of those. My name is Simba Elijah Charles-Kiag.
And I'm Brenda Nyamichaba.
And today we are joined by All right, Brenda, let's close the week, shan't we?
Yes, and we're closing the week by taking a look at what's been happening in the real estate sector as cash buyers now have an upper hand in homes market due to banks cutting back down on loans being disbursed to the real estate sector, edging out mortgage borrowers.
Now, latest data by the Central Bank of Kenya shows the value of mortgage loans disbursed by Kenyan banks increased by half a percentage point. Now, this reflects a negative 0.5% growth, underlying a credit crunch affecting both buyers and developers of houses.
Now this goes against the 7.5% positive growth recorded in the year 2017 as per CBK data, indicating a sharp drop in lending to the real estate sector. Now the question we're asking is, why is there a drop in the mortgage loans being dispersed, and what is the impact of the mortgage credit crunch to the real estate sector?
It is true that the amount of mortgage that banks are giving out to Kenyan market, it has declined. Last year it declined by negative 0.5%, and compared to what we had in the previous year 2017, we had a growth of 8.7%. That tells you that banks are holding back in giving loans to Kenyans. This can actually be backed up by the current data that we have. In Kenya, we have about 25,000 mortgages out of a population of 45 million. So it gives a clear picture that mortgages are not being pushed to the market. And the biggest contributor to this is the capping of interest rates, of which banks are required to adhere to the capping of interest rates. So a lot of banks are holding back in giving mortgages and also other forms of loans. So what we are having, the remainder is those people who are able to afford to buy. We have actually buyers and you have developers. Those people who have the financial muscle to do it, they are only few. So the ripple effect we are having is that we are getting less units being pushed to the market, less units of housing being pushed into the market. So by the end of the day, what you're having, the rental prices are rising faster than the property prices. What we had last year, we had the rental prices going up by 2.5% going on. However, the property prices were below 2%. So those are the effects we are having in the market currently. The impact of the mortgage credit crunch in the sector is that a lot of developers and buyers of houses, most of them rely on credit to develop and to buy, because it is very expensive to develop housing in Kenya. So what is going to happen is that very few people, the cash buyers who are able to buy and develop, are the ones pushing units to the market. So the ripple effect is that we have fewer units because very few people are able to develop housing. So what we had last year, the rental prices increased with less than 2%, and also the property prices increased with more than 2.5%. So we are able to see that the impact here, we are having the rental prices increasing faster than the property prices.
Sadly, however, the real estate industry is not doing so well in the country, especially the high end of the market and the middle class segment. What is attractive now is low-cost housing, but even what we call low-cost housing is significantly still out of reach for many of the people at the bottom of the pyramid. And so you find that it is a flawed industry, as it were. There are too many commercial buildings that are empty. I think there have been reports you've heard of landlords that are willing to give up to 6 months for free to new tenants. There are even the ones that are for residential units that are still unoccupied 6-7 years later. For this reason, mortgage lenders are uncomfortable to give loans, except maybe people who have money, ready money, who are already willing to buy, and would probably require an extra amount of 10-20%. These ones, the risk exposure is very minimal for the banks, and so it tells the credit analysts to just offer the loans. And so this is the problem we have in the real estate sector. Naturally, this will slow down construction, this will slow down real estate in the short to mid-term, but after a while I see the market correcting itself.
Now over to another story that is helping us close the week. Now, Kenya's goods trade surplus with African countries for the first 11 months of 2018 fell below the 10 billion mark for the first time in over a decade, underlining the growing uncompetitiveness of Kenya's products in the market.
The surplus, the gap between imports and exports, narrowed to 8.89 billion Kenyan shillings in the year 2018, January to November, the lowest ever recorded since 1998.
Now, latest data by the Central Bank of Kenya shows that the earnings from exports, that is within the African market, fell by 2.16% within the first 11 months of 2018 all the way through to November, compared to the same period last year, which stood at 200.12 billion shillings, which is the lowest since the 171.35 billion shillings recorded in 2010.
Imports from African countries, on the other hand, hit a record of 191.23 billion Kenyan shillings, a growth of 5.84%, or 10.20 billion Kenyan shillings over the corresponding year of 2017, which recorded a 181.03 billion Kenyan shilling bill.
With all this data, therefore, the question is, why the drop? And why has Kenya been struggling to sustain its exports to other African countries?
It's true that exports have actually gone down by 2.6%, hitting around 200 billion. At the same time, imports actually went up by 5.8%, hitting 191 billion. That would translate to around 8.8 billion difference between our exports and our imports. Generally, what's happening is that the local manufacturers import some of the raw materials from outside the country, and when importing, there is the import declaration fee, there is also the railway levy. These are taxes which increase the cost of production by around 12%. So by the end of the day, the cost of production going up, that means that also the prices of what they are going to export also goes up. Another way that the government can chip in to help this sector come up, we have had these free trade areas. For example, the COMESA, you have the SADC, you have also the East African Community. These are the types of relationships we should be looking into so that we maximize where we're able to export our goods and services. Yeah, because these are the channels which help countries be able to spread their wings across borders.
Major markets for Kenyan commodities is the East African countries, namely Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, South Sudan, Burundi. And they are the ones who've been importing a lot of our manufactured products, as we import a lot of the agricultural products, because for one reason or another, we never seem to produce enough for our population. The drop, if you ask me, would be occasioned by two factors. One, these countries themselves have been trying over the years to develop their manufacturing sectors. A lot of local companies have been trying to set base in these countries. The same way banks, Kenyan banks, are finding their way into the East African countries is the same way the manufacturers are also considering taking a manufacturing plant in some of these countries. In that case, of course, you've already lost an export. But the other reason would be the diplomatic tussle between Kenya and Tanzania has contributed significantly to a loss of export opportunities for the country, because Tanzania is a major importer of all products. From what I hear, they are saying they are willing to import anything except Kenyan products, and this will impact us negatively. Moving forward, the opportunities is there are still opportunities in terms of diversifying our exports. We are still importing significantly too many things from China and UAE. But if we can diversify our products, then some of these countries will not have a choice, but will still get our imports.
Now on to the banking sector, as Kenyans borrowed more than they saved in SACCOs, compelling the entities to borrow 31 billion Kenyan shillings from commercial banks to bridge the loan demand. This was an increase from the 26 billion Kenyan shillings borrowed last year.
Now, according to a report released this year, the amount of loans that was disbursed to Kenyans stood at 373 billion Kenyan shillings against a backdrop of 342 billion Kenyan shillings that went into savings. Now, the report indicates that these loans were 12.7% higher than the same amount of loans that was disbursed in 2017 that stood at 331 billion Kenyan shillings.
With the growing popularity of SACCO loans arising due to the perception of it being cheaper and having less conditions of collateral as compared to bank loans, with more borrowing and less saving, what is the trickle effect to the banking sector?
This issue is not more of spending more than saving. It's actually an aftermath after the capping of the banking rate. So what's happening is that banks are not giving loans to the normal mwananchi. So the normal mwananchi is actually limited on where they can be able to access financing. And one of the easy way of accessing financing is using SACCOs, because from their end they require almost very few collateral, because the model of SACCOs is co-guaranteeing one another to be able to access a loan. That means even a Kenyan mwananchi without even any form of collateral, they can be able to access financing. So what we are seeing here is that there has been a shift of whereby Kenyans are going to other areas because banks have denied them loans. So they are moving to SACCOs. SACCOs are readily available to give them loan. And the impact of this is that you are getting SACCOs going out to borrow actually from commercial banks. So they are able to lend out to the normal mwananchi. So this is it's an eye-opener also to banks to see that Kenyans are not limited to them. They are moving out there. The numbers also reflect also in the mobile lending platforms, because we are seeing even more coming on board, because the market has really gone up. We have the microfinance banks, microfinance institutions doing very well as compared before the capping, because there has been a shift of guard and most Kenyans are going to these institutions to seek financing. Banks don't really rely on just interest from loans. They also have investments, for example, in treasury bills and bonds, other form of investments that they put in their basket of income. Banks still give loans to individuals who have MOUs with their companies.
Last week, the taxman, the Kenya Revenue Authority, was receiving fresh papers from treasury bond holders in the country for fresh remapping of their wealth. This week again, the taxman is locked in a bitter court battle with sports betting company SportPesa. Why? KRA is demanding 10.3 billion shillings in terms of withholding tax dating back to 3 years ago from its winners.
The taxman in May last year sent a demand notice to Pevens East Africa, the entity behind SportPesa, asking it to remit withholding tax from bet winners in the period of 2015 to 2016.
Now, this is where things get interesting. SportPesa is quoting a court order dated in 2014 that stopped the taxman from claiming the withholding tax. KRA turns around and says, we were not party to this alleged suit. We did not receive a court order, so we are coming for our 10.3 billion.
Now, we agree that this is a move by KRA to curb tax deficit in the country, but what is the ripple effect to the gaming industry and other businesses in general?
Well, first of all, the betting industry needs to be taxed significantly. They are not producing. They are collecting what would have been savings of hard-working Kenyans and putting it into individual pockets. This money is making its way to London to sponsor football teams in London, and now really sponsoring rally drivers. It's a very twisted industry. I would want it taxed even some more. In terms of the winners, what work have they put in to the extent that you can say, you know what, we need not tax them so that we are promoting the work that they are doing. They have done nothing. It's money windfall gain. If it can be reimbursed back into the working industry through taxation, even better. But at the end of the day, you'd admit that the government is broke. And so the easier ways of getting money when you are broke as a government is taxation, and you go for things like betting, you go for things like the sin tax, cigarettes and alcohol. So they are in the right direction. Tax everyone there. Gambling and cigarette smoking are brothers. And so even if you tax it so high, you will still have gamblers who are gambling. And so it's not going away anytime soon. However, it will dissuade a few other people who might be interested in going into the habit. It will also generate income for the country, for revenue for the government. And so in terms of gamblers, I don't think it's going to affect them in any way.
Well, I have not crammed your number, but I like to think they use Safaricom as your service provider, that is mobile-wise.
Yes, I do use Safaricom, Simba, and please do not cram my number, that's a bit stalkerish.
I also do use Safaricom as well. Now, us having Safaricom as a mobile provider is actually no coincidence, because Safaricom enjoy a 64.2% market share of the telecommunication space in the country.
Which is a proven fact that the majority of Kenyans do prefer using Safaricom.
Okay, now let's put this little chat into perspective, therefore. Now, last week we saw the announcing of a signing deal between two telecommunication companies in the country, that is Airtel Kenya and Telkom Kenya. These two companies merged their enterprise services, mobile services and carrier services to form one single joint venture company that will go by the name Airtel Telkom. Now, this will give them a 33% market share against the backdrop of 64.2% owned by Safaricom.
The planned Airtel and Telkom merger is likely to trigger a tariff war in the telecommunications sector as the new entities opt for a low-cost pricing strategy in order to attract a larger customer base. But does this guarantee an expansion in the market share?
The intention of the merger is actually to expand the market share of both Telkom and Airtel as one firm. It's important to know that the market on its own is price sensitive, whereby a small change of price will cause a very big change in the services that you offer or the goods that you offer. So what I'm trying to say here is that with that merger, Airtel and Telkom, they are likely to come up with a low pricing strategy, whereby with the low price they are aiming to attract people to move from Safaricom to their network, and which, as we've proven before, can really actually work, because the market in that industry is actually very elastic. So it's upon them to know how to do it well and also how to execute the merger. They can also come up with a product to counter M-Pesa. For that, it may be a little bit difficult since M-Pesa is deeply rooted in Kenya, though it will take time for them to be able to counter that kind of product. However, for the other products of call, and also we have data and SMS, they can really be able to gain a lot of ground when they come together. But it's also important to note that mergers and acquisitions is not actually the answer to all the problems a company can be going through. It's important to know that the most important thing is actually dealing with the root cause of a problem.
Now, Brenna, I think we are closing the week with a lot of KRA news, isn't it?
Yes, most definitely.
So it's back to KRA again. Now, the taxman has uncovered yet another corruption racket at Mombasa Port by realizing that most vehicles are being unreleased from the airport without proper NTSA registration.
The Kenya National Authority has warned that unregistered cars pose security threat to the country, as seen in the recent terrorist attack that happened at the 40 Riverside Drive, where a 2 registered car was used to ferry terrorists to the business complex.
Now, the taxman is losing a lot of revenue by the unregistered cars being directed into the market as well. Now, with a rampart of such cases, how much is the country really losing to corruption? Let's put that into focus as we close the week for you.
A third of Kenyan budget goes into people's individuals' pockets. A third of our budget, that's well over 500 billion, goes into private pockets of individuals that are in government, of cartels, of tenderpreneurs. The incident at the port of Mombasa with the number plates is sad, but it's a very small drop in the ocean of corruption in this country. And I would not cry over it. I would cry over things like SGR. Now, that was a major scam. I would cry about the scam at the energy sector, where there is a lot of scam going on with KPLC, independent power producers. That's something to talk about. I would talk about the construction sector and how much money is going into private individuals' pockets, courtesy of tenders offered to the Chinese contractors who give kickbacks of 10% to procurement managers and senior officers. That is something that is significant to the economy, because that comprises over 100 billion worth of money. The number plate saga at the port is sad because it exposes us significantly to insecurity, but it is a small drop. For years, we have been communicating to the government that the major driver of terrorism in the country is corruption. It is corruption because the charcoal smuggling business in Kismayu through the border into Kenya is driven by Kenyan soldiers, and it is sponsoring Al-Shabaab in Somalia. It is deadly because when the Al-Shabaab have gotten this money, they bribe the police at the border and they get into the country. It is still corruption because when they come into the country, they bribe immigration officials to get IDs, to get passports, to get access to local documents. It is deadly because these same very people bribe to immigration officials at the port, at the airport, to ensure that weapons come into the country without being searched, without being registered. It is all corruption. If you audit the trail all the way, it is all corruption, and it exposes the country significantly. And we've been telling the government this. But you see, every time they set out to fight corruption, it's cosmetic, it's political. You are not seeing the actual guys who are corrupt across board being tried. You're seeing people they view to be against the system being tried. You're seeing the small fish that is not connected being tried. But the big fish, the real beneficiaries, are not being tried.
Kenya has reached out to 18 global oil refinery firms in an ongoing search for buyers of the Turkana crude oil exports targeted for the second quarter of this year.
Now, Petroleum Principal Secretary Andrew Kamau says that he has written circulars to these firms detailing the level of crude oil expected in the region so as to assess their interest. The question is though, with all these plans underway in the region, how much revenue distribution do we expect in the Turkana region? Let's close the week by putting that into proper focus, shan't we?
The 18 buyers, their major role is actually to test our oil. By testing our oil, that means they have to check which are the chemicals that are in that oil, how much sulfur is there, how light is it or how heavy is it. All those assessments done by individual buyers, they're able to give a quote on the quote on the oil. For example, one can quote $45 per barrel, another one can quote $47 per barrel. And now it's upon the ministry to decide. Once the production starts very well, they can decide who to go with. However, it will help also indicate how much we are able to get from the oil actually in Turkana. Though with regards to the economy, it's not that big as we expected. Even if we're able to produce oil with the quantities that have been measured, it still, yes, to contribute, but it still not be that significant in Kenya. There will be revenue from oil in Turkana, but as compared to our major forex earning sectors, it will be not highly ranked as the agriculture sector that we have in Kenya. Ideally, we should have a portion that goes to the county and another portion that also goes to the national government.
Now, still on the energy sector, the National Oil Corporation of Kenya has suspended 7 employees due to the loss of 100 million Kenyan shillings worth of fuel.
Now, the 7 were charged with stock taking at the company were interdicted after a forensic audit revealed the loss of the 900,000 litres of fuel, over 100 million shillings. Now, the question is therefore, with National Oil Corporation of Kenya losing such amount, what does that mean to the company?
Let's find out from our experts.
This is a corruption issue, and to corporate is more of corporate governance, and which is actually emerging in Kenya, that firms and companies should take corporate governance issues seriously. For the company, on their end, what's going to happen is that they have also to ensure that their internal controls, they're up to standards and also up to date, so that employees are not able to take advantage of loopholes in the company.
In September 2017, KRA enforced a formula that was made to ensure that traders could only claim zero-rated supplies as part of a VAT regulation published by Treasury Secretary Henry Rotich.
As a result, KRA now uses the ratio of zero-rated supplies to the total taxable sales revenue to arrive at refunds, as opposed to the earlier formula, which was the difference between output and input tax.
The Kenya Association of Manufacturers protested against the change of the formula, saying it made it difficult to lodge withholding VAT claims.
Now, manufacturers this week have blamed the new formula in calculating VAT refunds for their cash flow challenges, which they say have resulted in the piling of defaulted loans. The question is, what is the impact of this new formula in the manufacturing sector, and why do we have so many non-performing loans in trade compared to other sectors in the country?
The non-performing loans in the trade sector, they're usually affected by a challenging business environment, which eventually may affect the liquidity of the companies in the sector. What led to the NPLs, the trade sector, is that we had a challenging business environment, which in turn may affect the liquidity of companies in the sector. And that results now to companies not being able to service their debt. So by the end of the day, we have NPLs growing because of a bad business environment.
The reason we have a lot of non-performing loans in trade is twofold. One, a lot of trade is agricultural, a lot of trade is perishable goods. The amount of loans that these people receive is usually minimal, so they may not be able to invest in some sophisticated equipment to transport some of these things. So perishability is on the high end. I know of a friend who was transporting fish from Turkana to Nairobi, and along the way the truck broke down and he had fish there. It took around 48 hours to repair the truck and get everything in place. By the time it was 48 hours, the fish was rotten. It was a bad stock. He could not recover from this because he had put almost all his money in this. And he could not recover, he could not repay the loan in good time. He had to have another conversation with the bank to see how he can start again from scratch. And this is very common in the fishing industry, it is common in agriculture industry, and so this is why you find a lot of non-performing loans. But on the other hand, the second reason as to why there is a lot of non-performing loans there is because of government failing to pay its suppliers. And when we talk of government, we talk of both national and county government. They take too long to pay suppliers. And this affects business because if, for instance, I borrowed 3 years back, government has not paid me. The government pays me on the 4th or the 5th year. That's all non-performing loans. And it is very common, it cuts across board. I know it's true in manufacturing. I also know it's true in trade because of stationery suppliers, because of all these suppliers that buy and sell. And so the real responsibility is on the government to invest in the perishable industries in terms of better equipment, in terms of subsidies. It is also on the government to ensure that it pays its suppliers in time. Manufacturers really need a lot of money in terms of float because you need a lot of inputs, you need a lot of money in logistics in terms of fuel, you need a lot of money in terms of accessing the market, whether it is through distribution or whether it is through marketing. If you are in the retail segment, it even calls for more input in terms of finances because that calls for advertising. So now when they have given VAT and the government delays in remitting this VAT, it is crazy because that is money that is lying somewhere. It is not reproducing, it is not being used in active production. And so their cries are valid in essence, and I think the government should also reconsider that.
Now on to our last top 10 story of the week. Crisp banknotes from various denominations are in the pockets of Kenyans, but what stands out is the 1,000 Kenyan shilling note.
True in fact, Brenda, because an analysis of the currency in circulation in the country shows that the Central Bank of Kenya has had to inject an extra 120.15 million extra pieces of 1,000 shillings notes worth 120.15 billion Kenyan shillings to meet the rising demand.
Despite the banknote quantities in circulation decreasing by 3.6% from 531 to 512 million pieces in the year 2017, in 2018 the 1,000 note Kenyan shilling booked at a 4.59% rise.
Currency in circulation rose by 3.4% in the financial year 2017-2018. Now, notes represented 97% of this rise, coins only 3%. Question is, why do we have more notes in circulation than coins, and what is causing the rise in demand of these notes? And then lastly, what does this circulation mean to the common mwananchi?
The notes have always been more in circulation than the coins because most Kenyans hold money for transactional purposes, and for transactional purposes a lot is done using notes than coins. Coins tend to be more of change, but for transactional or making payments it has been more of the notes being used.
When you see increase in circulation or demand for money, it points to higher inflation. It points to one thing, inflation. And inflation is simply when you have too much money chasing very few goods. So then prices of goods have gone up, and therefore the coins are no longer as effective as they used to be. The notes are more effective. But then what that means to you and I is that the cost of living is high. You need more money to access the same services you used to access with fewer or less money, or to access the same goods you used to access with less money. On the other hand, on the flip side, I don't think the government of Kenya has successfully managed to overcome the threat of counterfeit money or forged money. You understand? There are too many illegal printers that are printing money. It's harder to print coins than it is to print notes. And a lot of fake money is in circulation, interestingly so, and the government has not managed to rein in on the fake money printing. I believe that that is an area that the central government or central bank needs to address urgently, because it drives inflation up and it makes the economy to be unnecessarily liquid.
So we've suddenly come to the end of the Big Ten for the week.
Yes, we certainly have.
Well, a first of the many episodes you're going to see every Friday. A big thank you to our experts for making this a Big Ten. It certainly was.
And if you want more of the top 10 business stories of the week, do tune in to all of our social media platforms. That is Metropol TV KE. That is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, as well as YouTube. My name is Brenda Nyamichaba.
My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiage.
Keep it Metropol TV, Kenya's first business channel. Till next time.